The endless blacktop of State Route 28, a lonely artery snaking through the desolate heart of the Mojave Desert, stretched before me like a dark, uncoiling serpent. I, Jack Rourke, long-haul trucker, was a night owl by necessity, a solitary wanderer of the asphalt plains. My rig, a chrome behemoth named the Wanderer, rumbled beneath me, a familiar vibration against the stillness of the desert night. Tonight's haul was a tight one, a load of sensitive medical equipment bound for a remote research facility near Area 51. The air crackled with a strange energy, a palpable tension that wasn't just the desert's usual dry heat. Whispers of strange lights and unexplained phenomena were common in this part of the world, tales I'd always dismissed as the ramblings of desert dwellers. But tonight, the stories felt closer, more real. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic roar of my engine and the occasional whine of the wind whipping across the barren landscape. The moon, a pale, spectral orb, cast long, distorted shadows that danced across the scrub brush, creating eerie illusions in the periphery of my vision. As I approached the desolate stretch known as Dead Man's Pass, a shiver ran down my spine. This section of the highway was notorious for its isolation, a place where cell service vanished and the silence became deafening. Local lore spoke of phantom headlights, vanishing hitchhikers, and a chilling sense of being watched. Suddenly, my CB radio crackled to life, a burst of static followed by a garbled voice. "Breaker, breaker, anyone out there? This is Lost." The voice was weak, strained, barely audible above the static. "This is the Wanderer," I replied, my voice echoing in the cab. "You got a location, buddy?" The static intensified, followed by a series of choked gasps. "Dead Man's Pass. Something wrong." The voice faded into a hiss of static, then silence. I tried to raise the caller again, but the CB was dead, a wall of static blocking any communication. A sense of unease settled in my gut. Something was definitely wrong. A few miles further down the road, I saw them. Headlights, far in the distance, flickering erratically, like dying embers. They were parked on the shoulder, a lone vehicle silhouetted against the stark desert landscape. I slowed down, approaching cautiously. As I drew closer, I could see it was a beat-up sedan, its paint faded, its windows tinted. The driver's door was ajar, swinging gently in the wind. I pulled the Wanderer to a stop behind the sedan, my headlights illuminating the scene. I stepped out of the cab, my boots crunching on the gravel. The air was thick with a strange, metallic scent, like ozone and burnt rubber. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. "Anyone there?" Silence. I approached the sedan, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The interior was a mess, papers scattered across the seats, a half-eaten sandwich lying on the dashboard. The keys were still in the ignition, but the engine was cold. I glanced around, my flashlight beam dancing across the desert floor. Then, I saw it. Footprints, leading away from the sedan, disappearing into the darkness. I followed the footprints, my heart pounding against my ribs. They led me to a small clearing, where I found a broken bar. Nothing. Just a patch of barren ground, devoid of any vegetation. But the metallic scent was stronger here, and I could hear a faint, high-pitched whine, like the sound of a malfunctioning machine. I scanned the clearing with my flashlight, searching for the source. Then, I saw it. A faint, shimmering distortion in the air, like heat haze, but colder, more intense. The distortion pulsed, growing larger, more defined. Then, a figure emerged, its form shimmering, its features indistinct. It was tall and gaunt, its skin pale and translucent. Its eyes glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light. It spoke, its voice a low, resonant hum, like the sound of 1,000 cicadas. "You should not have come," it said, its words echoing in my mind. "This place. It is not for you." I stumbled back, my flashlight beam shaking. I didn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew that I was in the presence of something, a broken bar alien. The figure moved towards me, its form shifting and distorting, its limbs elongating, its fingers turning into long, sharp claws. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the darkness. I didn't stop until I reached the Wanderer, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. I climbed into the cab, slammed the door shut, and started the engine. I pulled away from the sedan, my tires screeching on the gravel. As I sped down the highway, I glanced in my rear-view mirror. The sedan was gone, vanished without a trace. The shimmering distortion was gone too, leaving only the empty desert landscape. I drove as fast as I could, my eyes glued to the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't stop until I reached the research facility, a cluster of brightly lit buildings in the middle of nowhere. I delivered my cargo, my mind still reeling from what I had witnessed. As I drove away, I glanced back at the facility, its lights glowing like beacons in the darkness. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that I had stumbled upon something beyond human comprehension, something that lurked in the desolate heart of the Mojave, something that watched and waited, in the silent, empty spaces of the night. And that some roads, some places, are best left undisturbed. The endless ribbon of Highway 17 stretched before me, a blacktop vein pulsing with the rhythm of my headlights. I, Sarah Jenkins, was a night courier, a solitary voyager navigating the desolate landscapes of rural Nevada. Tonight's run was a long haul, Reno to a small mining town near the Utah border. The moon, a sliver in the vast, star-dusted sky, cast long, distorted shadows that danced across the desolate terrain. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of my engine and the occasional rustle of desert brush. I'd always found a strange comfort in these nocturnal journeys, a sense of solitude and freedom. But tonight, the silence felt different. It was heavy, expectant, like the air before a storm. An unsettling unease settled in my stomach, a prickling sensation that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I glanced at my rearview mirror. Nothing but the inky blackness behind me. I checked my watch. 2:17 a.m. I was miles from the nearest town, the only sign of civilization the occasional blinking lights of distant windmills. Then, I saw them. Headlights, far in the distance, gaining on me rapidly. I breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, another traveler. But as the headlights drew closer, I noticed something strange. They weren't the steady, focused beams of a normal vehicle. They were erratic, flickering, like the lights of a dying fire. The vehicle closed the distance, its form emerging from the darkness. It was a pickup truck, old and battered, its paint peeling, its headlights flickering wildly. It seemed to sway from side to side, as if the driver were struggling to maintain control. As it pulled alongside me, I glanced over. The driver was a silhouette, a dark figure slumped behind the wheel. The truck's windows were tinted, obscuring any details. Then, the truck swerved, veering dangerously close to my lane. I gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounding. I honked my horn, but the truck didn't respond. It continued to drift, its headlights blinding me. I swerved to avoid a collision, my tires screeching on the asphalt. The truck followed, its headlights now directly in my rearview mirror, blinding me. I slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the side of the road. The truck did the same, stopping a few feet behind me. I turned off my engine, plunging the car into darkness. The only light came from the truck's flickering headlights, which cast long, distorted shadows across the desert floor. I sat in silence, my breath catching in my throat. I could hear the truck's engine idling, a low, guttural rumble. Then, the driver's door opened. A figure emerged, its silhouette stark against the truck's headlights. It was tall and gaunt, its movements slow and deliberate. It walked towards my car, its footsteps crunching on the gravel. I could hear the faint sound of its breathing, a raspy, wheezing sound. I locked my doors, my fingers trembling. I fumbled for my phone, but there was no signal. The figure reached my car, its face still obscured by shadow. It leaned against my window, its breath fogging the glass. I could see its hand, long and bony, its fingers tapping rhythmically on the glass. Then, it spoke. Its voice was a low, raspy whisper, like the sound of dry leaves rustling in the wind. "You shouldn't be out here," it whispered, its voice echoing in the silence. "This road a broken bar, it belongs to us." I didn't respond, my body frozen in terror. The figure continued to tap on the glass, its rhythm growing faster, more insistent. Then, it stopped. It straightened up, its silhouette towering over my car. It turned and walked back to its truck, its footsteps crunching on the gravel. It climbed into the truck, slammed the door shut, and pulled away, its headlights disappearing into the darkness. I sat in my car, my body trembling, my mind reeling. I didn't understand what I had just experienced, but I knew that I had encountered something a broken bar unnatural. I waited until the truck's headlights were completely gone. Then I started my engine and pulled back onto the highway. I drove as fast as I could, my eyes glued to the road, my heart pounding against my ribs. I didn't stop until I reached the next town, a small, brightly lit oasis in the vast desert. I pulled into a gas station, my hands shaking as I filled my tank. I looked back at the highway, at the dark, empty road. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that I would never drive that stretch of highway again. And that some nights, some roads, truly belong to something else. The rhythmic clatter of the printing presses echoed through the vast, cavernous halls of the old newspaper building, a sound that had been the soundtrack to my life for the past 5 years. I, Marcus Finch, night press operator, was a creature of the night, a silent guardian of the news. Tonight, however, the familiar rhythm was off-key, punctuated by a strange, unsettling silence. The air was thick with the smell of ink and damp paper, but there was another scent, a faint, metallic tang that made my nostrils tingle. The building, a relic of a bygone era, was notorious for its quirks and creaks. But tonight, the usual sounds were replaced by something a broken bar else. A low, guttural humming, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls. It was coming from the old archives, a labyrinth of dusty shelves and forgotten stories, a place I rarely ventured. Tonight, however, the humming pulled me like a siren's call. The archives were shrouded in darkness, the only light filtering in from the dim hallway. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and mildew, a musty odor that clung to my nostrils. The humming grew louder, a low, resonant drone that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness. The shelves stretched into the distance, a maze of forgotten headlines and yellowed photographs. I felt a prickling sensation on my skin, the feeling of being watched. I followed the humming, my flashlight beam dancing across the shelves, searching for the source. It led me to the back of the archives, to a section that was cordoned off with yellow tape. A faded sign, "Restricted Area," hung crookedly above the tape. The humming was deafening now, a low, guttural drone that seemed to emanate from behind the tape. I cautiously stepped over the tape, my flashlight beam revealing a large, metal door. The door was old and rusted, its surface covered in a network of intricate symbols. The humming emanated from behind the door, a low, pulsing sound that seemed to vibrate in my skull. I reached out and touched the door, my fingers tracing the strange symbols. The metal was cold and damp, sending a shiver down my spine. Then, the humming stopped. A moment of silence, thick and heavy, settled over the archives. Then, a voice, a low, raspy whisper, echoed through the darkness. "You should not have come," the voice whispered, its words echoing in my mind. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs. I didn't understand what I was hearing, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that I was in the presence of something ancient, something malevolent. The metal door began to glow, a faint, pulsating light emanating from the intricate symbols. The voice grew louder, more insistent, its words filled with a desperate, chilling urgency. "Release me," it repeated, its voice echoing through the archives. "I have waited so long." The door began to shake violently, the glowing light pulsing like a heartbeat. The voice grew louder, more insistent, its words filled with a desperate, chilling urgency. "Release me," it repeated, its voice echoing through the archives. "I have waited so long." Then, the door burst open, sending shards of rusted metal flying through the archives. The glowing light erupted, filling the room with an blinding intensity. I shielded my eyes, my body trembling with fear. When I opened my eyes, the door was gone, replaced by a dark, gaping hole. The humming was gone, replaced by a chilling silence. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. I didn't understand what I had seen, what I had heard. But I knew that I had witnessed something terrible, something that defied explanation. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty archives. I didn't stop until I reached the printing press room, my sanctuary, a vast, echoing space filled with the rhythmic clatter of the machines. I slumped into a chair, my body trembling, my mind racing. I stared at the printing presses, their rhythmic motion a hypnotic comfort. Then, I saw it. A shadow, moving in the corner of my eye. I turned and saw a figure standing in the shadows, its form barely visible in the dim light. It was tall and gaunt, its skin pale and glistening, its eyes glowed red in the darkness, burning into my soul. "You have disturbed my slumber," it hissed, its voice a chorus of whispers, a symphony of decay. "Now, you will pay the price." The figure moved towards me, its form shifting and distorting, its limbs elongating, its fingers turning into long, sharp claws. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the printing press room. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty halls. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to escape. I ran past the towering printing presses, past the rolls of newsprint, past the empty offices. I reached the loading dock, the large metal doors leading out to the street. I slammed the doors open, stumbling out into the cool night air. I ran, my footsteps echoing through the deserted streets. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, a small, cramped space above a bakery. I slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. I slumped against the wall, my body trembling, my mind reeling. I didn't understand what I had seen, what I had heard. But I knew that I had witnessed something terrible, something that defied explanation. I looked out the window, at the dark, deserted streets. I saw the silhouette of the newspaper building, its windows dark and silent. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, that the figure was still there, waiting for me. And I knew that I would have to go back.